You have found the Shanny Pants Show. Hello, it's Shanny, the least influential influencer that there ever was. With a heart full of laughter and a journey that runs deeper than the trendiest makeup You may know me from my ridiculously comedic fashion and makeup tutorials on social media. But guess what? There's so much more to the story. I was born, raised, and married in a cult. When I left the cult at 31 years old, I had no knowledge about real life or how to process what I had been through. I felt very alone. The past couple of years, I've been on an incredible journey of learning, growing, and recovering, and I'm excited to share this with you. I'll bring you stories from the Cultiverse, where many cult survivors and experts share their knowledge and experiences. Their stories are more than inspiring. They're a roadmap to self-discovery and resilience. So get ready for a podcast that's part comedy, part wisdom, and a whole lot of heart. If you feel alone in your journey, my hope is that will change once you hear these stories. Welcome to the Shanny Pants Show.
I am the founder of Tears of Eden. I run Tears of Eden. It is a community and resource for survivors of spiritual abuse from the evangelical community. So we have a podcast, which is Uncertain, which is what you were on. And we do resources, written resources, Instagram resources. That's our main social media places at Uncertain Podcast on Instagram. And then we also do support groups. We're working on that part of it. We really want those to be free to survivors. So we have to raise the money for those support groups. So we don't know if they're going to happen this year because we're working on raising the funds for them, but it's very important to us that they are free to people because when folks leave cults, but then when folks end up having to leave churches or church jobs, you spend so much money on therapy and meds, and a lot of people have had to lose their careers and lose their jobs, and so we just didn't want to add that extra financial burden, and so that's very important to us. We'll see if it's going to work. We have been piloting these programs for about 2 years. They're really great. They're really, really, really awesome. We have mental health professionals that run them. I'm also a mental health professional. I work with cult survivors and folks who have experienced sexual abuse, spiritual abuse survivors, religious trauma. And I am also a published author of a novel. My first novel came out in 2021. It seems as if it doesn't have anything to do with anything else that I do. Yet, I'm very passionate about art and how art helps us heal and plays a role in our healing process and helps us just survive. So, very passionate about that. That's me.
I love everything that you do. And now that I have met you in person, I just love you even more. And I think that the need is so great for what you do because obviously we see it out there all the time. And I love that you are, I'll drop a link too in the notes because I love that you are trying to raise money for survivors. What I love about what you're doing now and other people that are doing similar things is that there are even these resources out there now, like I think about, it's been like 12 years since I've got out. There was nothing like I wouldn't have even known what to look up, where now with social media and podcast, I feel like if people just search, spiritual recovery or spiritual abuse or religious abuse, however they word it, you're going to find something. And like you had mentioned, even just the Instagram, like I follow a lot of Instagrams on mental health and healing and just seeing like little snippets on Instagram is value, And so I love how many people like you are doing this because I do feel like the need is so great.
And it's very new. Like I was interviewing someone yesterday and we were looking up some books that we had both found that were helpful to us. And we were like looking up when they came out, and they came out in like the last 10 years. Like this is not something that's been around for hundreds of years. It's very, very new, like within the past decade, a lot of the stuff we know. So we're at the frontier of this type of recovery and understanding dynamics, of course, of control and power and all of these things that we're just kind of starting to unpack of the amount of damage that it does.
Well, and I feel like too, with mental health being more in like the forefront of, our country right now, and, supposedly
Supposedly.
it's it's supposed to be like, all these changes, and I'm still like with insurance and stuff. I'm like, no, like mental health.
Yeah, and then what mental health professionals make versus what other industries make, and it's just
Right.
ridiculous, like, our money is not saying that we
Yeah.
value it. And a lot of the good therapists, especially like the trauma therapists and stuff, don't accept insurance simply because insurance doesn't pay them enough. And so they're just like, and a lot of them, everyone that I know, including myself, we have slots for folks who can't pay that much. Most people do that. Most people have sliding scale, but insurance just doesn't pay well. So a lot of them are leaving insurance and just like, I'm not taking insurance anymore because they don't make enough money for what they do and how much training they have and how much continuing ed credits we have to have and all of the things that we are investing every year to maintain our credentials on top of working with people. So yeah, it's kind of like art and then mental health field and then other things.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
would
Yeah.
both fields that are undervalued in the society. Mhm. And then if you're looking for someone with, like, the dynamic of understanding religious trauma or understanding cult trauma, like, it's gonna be really hard to find something that so,
And when
yeah.
you find them, they're very booked up and
Mhm,
very expensive, and
mhm.
it is what it is, but it is hard.
On that note, though, I do have openings for more clients, should anyone be
Okay.
listening. So
Yes. Let's talk about kind of your story. What brought you to decide to do this? Because I don't really know. Like, I know you and we've chatted, but I don't really know your real story. Like, what kind of prompted you, or was there anything, or did you just always want to do this?
Yeah, I just woke up one day and I'm
Did you?
going
Yeah.
to work
Hmm.
with survivors of spiritual abuse. No, there's a
That
story.
seems
There's
like
definitely
something
a
that just
story.
falls into your head. Yeah.
Yes. And I feel like a lot of folks who end up doing this work also have a personal experience. There are some unicorns that didn't have a personal experience and for personal reasons became interested in it. But I feel like most folks have a personal experience, and I do have personal experience. I grew up in what I will call a fundamentalist cult, which was very similar to the group that you grew up in. Like, and even just things like women weren't allowed to go to college, and very very cloistered, and like these are the friends you're allowed to have because they think like us and like-minded believers, and everything was based on the Bible. And so grew up very similar to the way that you described that you grew up as well. Homeschooled, and and about 16 is when we got into this thinking. Um, for folks who want to Google it, the Christian patriarchy movement or the stay-at-home daughter movement, and some of the leaders are Doug Phillips, Doug Wilson, Bill Gothard, Shiny Happy People. Those are some of the more well-known folks associated with this movement, and so that's how I grew up. And when I left, it's probably what I left when I was like 26, and I the the way that I left and the way that I, like, plotted my escape and spent, like, 2 years coming up with a plan and, secretly taking my parents off my bank account, um, doing college in secret. A lot of the things that I did are very similar to, like, a domestic violence situation where, like, a wife a wife in a domestic violence situation is planning and putting things in place and saving money and secretly having to do all these things in order to escape. That's probably what was most similar to my escape. And had a college degree when I left finally, and had very little work experience, very little resume experience. And so I knew like the main thing that I needed to survive was money. And so just that reality of how limited they keep you as a form of control so that you can't leave, because you don't have the resources to. Yeah. And I'm unpacking more of that now of like, oh, this was like an intentional withholding of resources so that you couldn't leave. They would never say that, but they would say it was God's will and doing living a biblical life. So I left that, fell into ministry was my chosen career choice, and the church played a huge role in my escape and my recovery, and I had how what I would describe at the time a good experience with the church, and decided that I wanted to go into ministry full time. Went on the mission field, went to seminary, and it took me. It was probably I saw little signs of it, but it took a chronic situation of spiritual abuse at a church I worked for in California about 4 years ago now. That that allowed me and prompted me to wake up and realize that the same things that I experienced in this fundamentalist cult were very much present in evangelicalism. They're just way more subtle. And all of the things like, women, you are equal to men. You just have a different role. And just these phraseologies of things and the way that things are presented and who is trusted and who is not, and this very patriarchal um yeah, just a very patriarchal system that did not benefit uh women or minorities, and didn't really care for children either. Like, I was in youth ministry and I saw just the way that, the youth were always like sidelined, and the youth ministry always had the fewest resources, just stuff like that that were very similar to the cult that I grew up in. They were just presented in a much nicer, kosher, more politically correct way. It took me almost a decade to see it, and I believed what they told me. And so there's definitely been some like, oh, so I left, one form of fundamentalism into a different form of fundamentalism, and I just thought it was so much better, but it really wasn't much better. And realizing now and giving myself compassion now for the fact that I did think it was better, and I did think that I was doing something different, and I did believe the things that people told me, which were lies, that they believed when they told them to me, and that it made sense. And if I had gone from fundamentalism into like the super progressive world, patriarchy exists everywhere. So, and it's just because it says it's progressive doesn't mean that it actually is. And I actually found that out before I decided to leave ministry of just like, it's going to be this way everywhere. I'm done with this. So while I was at the church is where I came up with the idea for Tears of Eden, because when I left the fundamentalist cult, I left alone. I was completely alone. I had no resources. I had no language for naming what happened to me. It was years before I was even using the word abuse to describe what I had went through. And so I had nothing. I had people who were like supportive of me. They were like, this isn't good and we want you to have a better life. But no one was like, this is abusive and like this is wrong. And so I left it very isolated, very alone. When I was going through the situation at the church, though, a lot of people were going through it at the same time on staff. And so there was like kind of some community happening around it. And we would meet at each other's houses at midnight after the kids had gone to bed and eat popcorn and drink whiskey, and so we had some community around what was happening. And then other books were coming out and podcasts were coming out, so we were like sharing them with each other, and we had language to name this experience. And so I wanted to create that type of experience for people leaving, because when you leave, you typically leave so isolated. That is still 100% true. Most people leave alone or with just their family. Very few people leave in community. And so that was the idea for Tears of Eden, was providing resources and language to name the experience, and then providing connection to people who have gone through the same thing. So that is the long story of how Tears of Eden came about.
And I do think there is, like, so much value in your story being not that people can't do what you do without a backstory, but I do think that having experience with something for let's say a client coming in, it
Mhm,
means more, you know, because it's
mhm,
like, okay, she truly gets it. Like you
mhm,
remember what it was like. And I even think that now just talking to people on the podcast or whatever, I've been out for 12 years now and yet I can still remember the
mhm,
what it was like to be in there, like, the feelings of guilt, the
mhm,
feelings of, like, putting shame on people because it's what we were told,
mhm,
you know, it's what we did, and so there's something about that. Having lived through an
mhm,
experience like that, me explaining it to you, you're gonna get it. You're gonna be like,
mhm.
"Okay, I remember, like, I was just there not too long ago." So, that
Yes.
is I think there's definitely value in that. Again, not to say someone else can't be an
Mhm,
awesome, trauma therapist without that, but I
mhm.
do see as a client coming in like, "Hey, have you ever experienced any yourself?" And
Absolutely.
yes, you have.
Yeah.
So, I
Yeah, and I
think
feel
that's
like for
meaningful.
trauma in general, I know a lot of therapists this is changing in the mental health world, but a lot of therapists are trained to kind of be unemotional when they're
Mm.
interacting, and that can actually be re-traumatizing for
Yeah.
a trauma survivor whose emotions are just and to, like,
Mhm.
come in and, like, run up against a steel wall, and so, like, trauma recovery coaches, like, we're trained to, like, engage emotionally with people and, like, "Oh, what you're feeling actually makes a lot of sense," and actually, when you told me that, I got really angry hearing that they did that to you and just allowing that emotional engagement and creating a space where emotions are okay. And I feel like that can have it and bringing our own stories into the space as well. It's still about the client, but there is a way to disclose tactfully that lets them know they're not alone. Because as trauma survivors, we just feel crazy. Like, when we've experienced abuse, it's like, "Was this my fault? Why did this happen? Why did they do this to me? What about me made them target me?" That all of those internal messages that we have in our heads that are placed there by abusers.
I love that you're saying that's changing in therapy because I had never really thought of that, but it's
Mhm,
true. Like, when I think about my original therapist, very like you said, no emotion, love her to death, but, like, picturing her versus who I'm using now,
mhm.
yeah, that is very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, and even just, like, I have a trauma therapist now too, and my previous therapist, for sure, same thing. Great, love them, super helpful, but the trauma therapist is just very different and very and just engaged and like, "Oh, I can tell she doesn't like my parents."
Yes.
I can tell she is not a fan, and she is letting me
Yes.
see that she is not a
You're like,
fan.
"You got it." You picked up on that, huh?
Yes.
Oh, that is so great. Oh
Yes.
my gosh. Now is most of what you do right now with, your clients, is it all virtual?
Mhm. Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I went the route that I went is because I didn't wanna be, uh, tied to a state. And a lot of therapists are doing that. They're adding on that, like, coaching credentials so that they can see people across state lines. And then they're saying, like, "When I meet with you, I'm a coach, not a therapist," and, that kind of thing because there are state line issues, um, with being a therapist. So, yeah.
Okay, so when you mentioned well, you kind of just threw your parents in there, so now I have a question about that too. So your family, you said you joined at 16.
Mhm.
What was your family doing up till 16, and how was that? And then dragging you into something like that at 16. Like, I just picture myself at 16. I was already in, but I was already like, "I want
Mhm.
out."
Mhm. Yeah, and I think I'm actually grateful that it didn't happen until I was 16 because I would say that my father, in my opinion, was abusive, up until then, but it wasn't the same type of control, until we encountered the Christian patriarchy movement, and it was almost like he was just, like, looking for and, like, waiting for the thing that would allow him to take full control of his family and turn his family into his homegrown incubator for his personal gratification, which is basically what it became. Um, and so at 16, I remember when he announced this wonderful vision for our family that we're going to be just this wonderful experience, and none of the girls were going to go to college, and we were going to prepare stay home and prepare to be wives and mothers. I like in this meeting, I remember it very vividly, our family meeting, just breaking down in tears. And it was, I didn't realize until that moment that I was, like, looking forward to leaving and going away to college, and didn't make the connections of, like, the abuse and the control that was already happening, that this was, like, my escape. I didn't make that connection. I didn't know that that's what was happening, but I realized how much I was looking forward to that, and now it's getting ripped from me, and I'm like, "I am stuck. I am stuck." in this family, and stuck in this house. I cannot leave. And it was just kind of that throughout the next 10 years of like, I'm stuck. And I look
And
back
you
on that
lived at home
time. Mhm,
till you're through till 26.
mhm. Yeah, and I just remember, like, I look back on that time, I was like, I was so depressed. I didn't know I was depressed, but, like, I was high functioning depression. I had tons of anxiety. I left. I don't know if you experienced this when you left, but, very common to experience the phobias of, like, God is going to strike me down, strike me with lightning, some catastrophe is right around the corner because I did this, like, that just, like, panic of, like, I'm going to die because I left. I experienced that right after, I left just the first night of and almost went back. I almost went back, and the only reason why I didn't is because I had spent 2 years plotting my escape, and the logic in my brain was like, it has to stop. I have to end now. But yeah, we were very weird in our community. People didn't understand why we weren't going to college. My father wanted me to answer, I'm preparing to be a wife and mother, so I don't need to go to college. I couldn't do it. It was mortifying. I could not do it. And I tried to kind of come up with things that I did, but really I wasn't doing anything. I was like, managing my parents' budget and cooking food for my family and going grocery shopping. I didn't really get to do anything that was fulfilling and enjoyable, and I liked school. I still like school. I really enjoy it, and so my last 2 years of high school were a total joke, and I hated it. Like, I was just like, and then when I went to college and I was doing college in secret, like, I liked it. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the challenge, and then later went to grad school. I like studying. I like learning. I like seeing A's at the top of my paper and taking exams, and I'm like, I enjoy it, and so it was just, like, so sad to me that it was just, like, whipped away, and it's like, it doesn't matter that you enjoy it. Your job is to get married and have babies. Like, there's no consideration for dreams, desires. You're not really supposed to have them unless they are completely aligned with your father and or your husband. And my sisters had an easier time, at least the 2 that were right under me, and they said they will say this, they were like, "We had an easier time because the things that we liked doing happened to be things that our father valued." Like, I had a sister who became a floral designer. He thought that he appreciated that. I had another sister who became a personal trainer. He valued that, like that. Those were things that he valued, so they had an easier time, whereas I liked theater.
Wow.
and
Right. Oh,
reading and school and and all of these things that just like he just
did it
didn't get.
pass?
Yeah, he didn't get.
Oh,
So I wasn't super
well,
athletic. I wasn't the golden child. We'll just say that.
wow. How sad for you.
I know,
You could
but I
have
get
been
to
the
do what
golden
I want
one.
now.
Yes, making
Yeah.
up for
The
all
world
those
is
years.
my oyster. I can
Yes,
do
it
whatever I
is.
want.
Oh
Endless
my
possibilities.
okay. So you left at 26, and did you go straight to college from there then? You had How were you taking classes privately? Was it online that you were able to get
Yes,
some
I did classes
Oh,
online, and I don't know anyone else who's
sneaky.
done it this way, so if you're out there and you have done college this way, email me, I'd love to hear. But, you can take CLEP tests, which are, like, testing out of, like, full subjects, and so for about a year, I took 1 CLEP test a week, and I tested out of, like, 2.5 years of college, and so, like, almost did 3 years of college in a year. And then I did the rest of it, which is online classes, and just found a college that would, like, accept all the club credits and then also had a degree, and at that point, I was just, "I need a college degree." I'm trying to apply for jobs, and they say bachelor's degree required, so I just need a bachelor's. They don't care what it is, they just want a bachelor's, which I will say, after my experience, is very elitist, and I know that that is just a very normal thing to request from people, but it's elitist. It is very expensive to go to college, especially right now, and there are wonderful people who can do amazing things who do not have college degrees, and that is separating the haves from the have-nots, and I would never put that as a requirement on a job description. Momentary soapbox. But, and so it was just like, get it done, get it done, get it done. I was nannying. There's a whole story of my father kicking me out of the house and, um, me being gone for 8 weeks and then going back, and once I went back, I think my father was, like, intent on, like, keeping me happy because he realized how close he was to, like, losing me, and so we had this very odd relationship where we, like, pretended everything was fine, and during that time, I was doing it all in secret, not telling him that it was happening because I'm like, "If he finds out that I'm plotting to leave, he will sabotage." And so I did all of these things without telling him. I was working as a nanny for a night nurse, and so I worked from, like, 3 to 11, and so after the kids went to sleep, I studied, and that was how I did it. And so I finished 18 months, a 4-year degree in 18 months.
And did you just, like, save every penny you made, and basically that went towards your college?
Mhm.
Wow. And then as far as, like, plotting to leave, what was the plot? Was it basically saving up enough to where you could leave? Was that kind of the main thing? And like you had said, taking them off your bank account.
Mm. Yeah, so I think the main things that I needed, like, I wasn't gonna be able to pay for college and do school at the same time, and it was like the goal was, like, get that college degree, so I was living with my parents while I was doing it, so that I didn't have the burden of also paying. Actually, I was paying my parents' rent, but not as much rent as I pay my parents' rent, but had 0 agency over my life. Let's just talk about that for a minute. Uh, um, but not as much as if I were, like, living on my own or had roommates or something. I probably could have made it happen, but it really was, like, every single penny was going towards, school, and then when I got kicked out of my house, my parents kicked me out, uh, for taking a job, a part-time job, without asking my father's permission, and then he kicked me out, and then at the time, I didn't own a car. My father owned our cars, and so that was like, w and I was working for a church, and the church, like, lent me a car, so that was, like, my first experience, like, with the church actually helping, and supporting someone who really needed it, and, um, and so they lent me a car, but I was like, "I need a car," and so I borrowed $5,000 from my father to buy a car, and then so I was paying for school, paying my dad back, and I was like, cannot pay that car fast enough. And when I went to the DMV to get the plates, I put it in my name. I was like, this is my name. Even if something happens and I can't pay him back, he cannot take this car from me. Like this was like my saving. And then when I left, I was like, even if I have to sleep in my car, I am not going back. And I was just like very, very committed. Like, at least I have a car. And little Toyota Solara, her name was Sophia. She took me from the South to Mexico to St. Louis to Washington, D.C. to Los Angeles. I sold her in Los Angeles before I moved back to St. Louis and had almost 300,000 miles on her, 2010, like, but she was my horse, my
Yes, she
shining
was your
steed to
Oh,
get away and to
wow,
escape, and
yes.
yes, so having the car, having finances, and I realize that, like, I am giving abusers fodder to know, like, how to control people, because if my father had known that any of this would lead to me leaving, he would have sabotaged it, and so it was a very tentative and I just, like, think about the dynamic between us those 2 years or whatever before I finally left. I I was just like, "So, like, everything is happy, like, everything's fine," and he gave me roses on Valentine's Day, and it made my skin crawl, and I wanted to throw them away, but instead I went downstairs and was like, "Thank you for the flowers, daddy," and it was just like, like, all of these little games that we were both playing, like, it was like this fake, interaction of like, "Everything is fine," and gratefully, he was living in denial and wanting to believe everything was fine, and I fed it 100% fed that narrative, um, and then I left and basically had a mental breakdown because you're just like
Um,
wound
don't know
so
why.
tight, so tight.
Yes. And that's so, like, scary, really, for you to do that with because, I mean, it's very similar to how we grew up, and you really don't know anything on the outside. So
Yes.
even though, like, you're nannying and that's maybe your worldly experience is nannying or whatever
Mhm.
other job. But even with that, because my dad allowed us to have jobs as teens, older teens, I guess, once we could drive. And where most people we were pretty rebellious for our group, and,
Mhm. Mhm.
um, so I had some outside influence with having a job in the world, but so the majority of you is still so tied to this group
Mhm.
and the belief system that it almost doesn't matter, like, people are
Yeah.
like, "Well, you went to public school, though," and I did, and I'm super grateful for it,
Mhm.
kind of. But it doesn't we weren't allowed to do anything with anyone after school, like, they were call 'em our
Mhm.
school friends, that's truly what they were, only at school
Mhm.
they were your friends, and,
Uh-huh.
so it's like, it seems like it would help, but I don't know that it does. I mean, I'm sure any amount of outside is
Mhm.
good,
Mhm. It's a culture
but people
shock.
often say that. Yes, and when we
Mhm.
really truly left, luckily I don't know, luckily, but I was married because we were married so
Mhm.
young. So at least we had each other, but
Mhm.
we had no clue what we were doing. Like, we did not know how to we didn't know anything about life. Like, it is so
Mhm.
sad how really not knowledgeable we were.
Mhm.
And that we'd even, like, made it that far in life. But but it is, like, I can't imagine you, like, you're an adult, and then you're all of a sudden
Mhm.
alone and never have really made choices, but good for you that secretly you were making and choices,
Mhm.
and they helped you.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that that's something I'm really passionate about now when I work with folks who have survived, is
Mm,
like excavating to find the resources that you had and that you did
mm,
utilize, and like acknowledging where you did make choices and you did have agency and you did say no and you did take care of yourself in those spaces,
yeah.
because we leave those spaces and feeling so much shame, like, why did I
Mhm.
let him do that to me? Why did I put up with this? Why did I
Right.
why did I pay rent when I wasn't allowed to do
Mhm.
anything? Like,
Right.
just like
Right. Right.
you experience so much shame, and so to acknowledge, like, how you did the best you could with the resources that you had at your
Yeah.
disposal, and you were tapping into that, and you were listening to yourself,
Mhm.
and that these choices that you made were for your survival. You did what you were supposed to do and what you had to do in that space, and kind of
Yeah.
releasing that shame that
Mm.
we all experience when we leave these high control
Right.
groups.
Before you left when you were 26, were your siblings in the home still during that time?
Mhm. Yeah, I had my oldest brother was in the army, and he might have been married. He might have been married by then. And I also think I had one sister who was also married. I'm kind of blinking on the timeline at the moment. I think that she was already out because she got married and my father had, um cut her off because she got married without his permission. And I think I think that had already happened when I left. I'm not
And so
entirely
she
sure
married
on that.
someone outside of the church
No, he was
or
still
inside?
a good little
Okay.
Christian homeschool boy. So
Wow,
yeah,
but your father
everything
just still didn't approve.
should have been fine. It was all about control. Like, how dare
Ugh,
she date someone without his permission and move out to marry this guy,
wow.
and it was not about the character of the man, it was about my father's wanting control
Mm,
of that
ugh,
relationship, and the job was the same thing. It wasn't about he didn't approve of the job that I had, it
mm.
was about the fact that I took it without asking.
And are your parents still a part of this group, this
I don't
church?
know.
Okay.
Yeah,
So you don't have
I don't
contact with them really?
I have no contact with my father. My mother's is it's very casual. I don't know what they believe. I hear things, uh, I couldn't tell you how they feel about things. I know enough to know that they haven't changed, and if they had it their way, like, they would still have those things. That some enough of it's still the same. I think that they had to recognize we have to let some things go or we're gonna lose all of our kids. And so but it's not any different. They haven't really changed, which is why I'm not in relationship with them. And so I don't know who their people are. I don't know what they believe right now. So,
What
I
about
couldn't tell
your
you.
what about your siblings? Do you have relationships with them?
Yeah, it's different. It's different with all of them. Everyone's at different places. Um, it's also based on gender because even just a very simple thing like if you're a boy, even though you're in the same abusive, controlling environment, if you're being raised to be the king of the household, and then the girls are being raised to always be subservient to a man and make a man's dreams come true. Even if that is the only difference in the way that you're being raised, it will impact significantly how you show up in the world. And I have definitely noticed that difference between my brothers and my sisters and myself. And so yeah, it's just kind of everyone's at different places. Um, Everyone's different places with education and how much education they got and how far away they moved from the South. And yeah, so yeah, everyone's on a different journey at the moment.
I mean, if you don't mind sharing, some professional advice for free. Um,
Mhm.
like what are some I won't say easy because recovery is not easy at all. But what are some kind of like key core things that you would say besides like reaching out for resources? 'Cause
Yeah, and I think for everyone, you have so much of your agency taken away. And depending on if you joined it as an adult or you grew up in it, there's a very I would say there's a different experience if you joined as an adult, so you have a baseline and you remember what it was like to make decisions and to have an opinion and to have desires. And for whatever reason, for safety, for security, you ended up in this group. And for someone like me, I never had a voice. Like, I never really had agency, and so I had to start from scratch. But I think they're very similar. That process is very similar. Jarette told me that, one of the things that she did when she left her group was when she would go to a restaurant, this is Jarette Bouillon, she go to a restaurant, I think it was her who told me that she would order the very first thing on the menu that sounded good. And that was just kind of like her way of like, my desires matter and like listening to my desire. And whatever it is, if it sounds good, the first thing that sounds good, that's what I'm ordering. And so just like little things, as I mentioned earlier, acknowledging how you were already I mean, somehow you left. So you had to have some kind of internal fortitude to know something was wrong and have just enough hope that things could be better in order to leave. Like, so something prompted that. And like, let's let's unpack that. Let's expand that. Let's let that grow. Like you've never allowed space for that to grow. And now you have some opportunity, but not too fast because it could be so overwhelming to have choices. And I think that some of the overwhelm that happens on the outside of a high control group will often prompts people to go to another high control group because they just want someone to tell them what to do and tell them what to believe. So I think getting comfortable with uncertainty, getting comfortable with ambiguity, sitting with those emotions, being comfortable saying, I don't know. Like, I don't know where I am, and even just especially the folks that I work with that are from evangelicalism, they're very, very heavy on you knowing what you believe. And so it can feel very disorienting to like suddenly not know. And like getting comfortable just saying, I don't know. And I don't know how long I'm going to not know. And and I'm just present and just presence, I think, is really important because I think trauma, we're always, living in the past or we're just fearful and planning for the future. And so engaging in mindfulness and yoga and embodiment practices that allow us to just be present in our bodies and be in our space and just the here and now. And yeah, just being really focused on um what we have right now and what we have control over right now. And yes, the future is terrifying, but we're not there yet. We're here.
And it's so like, you saying that, I'm just like, "Ugh." It's so hard, like, because I am and I'm sure it comes partially from how I was raised this way, but, like, I am such a controlling person, and that's
Mhm.
one thing I've had to work on a lot in the past several years because I have kiddos with behavioral issues, and so
Mhm.
we've done the therapy and the classes and all the things, and so each of my kids, which I mean, I think this is this way anyway, all kids are different and you hear your parent every child differently. It's so true. But
Mhm.
learning, like, I don't have control over these situations. Like, I truly don't have
Mhm.
control. And it was such a, like, light bulb moment when I truly
Mhm.
let that sink in and how it changed the relationship, and I struggle with it to this day and always will, but how it
Mhm.
changed the relationship with my children once I really truly got, like, "You don't have control in this situation, so what do you
Mhm.
have control of? How can you make some changes here?"
Yes.
And it
Yep.
helped so much, but I think even the simple things like you were saying what Jarette had said about picking out meals,
Mhm.
that it seems so silly and simple, but that's huge, and I think
Mhm.
even to this day I just want someone to tell me what to do. I just want
Mhm.
someone to say, "This is how you do it, so do it start there," and
Mhm.
like, I want someone just to tell me how to do everything because I think it's so ingrained to just follow, 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 and you're not ever used to really having to think for yourself. And so it's like that part, it like and I'm sure part of it is just personality. It seems so silly, but it really is it's a big deal. And I
Mhm.
noticed how many places in my life that filters through and
Uh-huh.
it's pretty scary, or even like how you said when you get out, you jump straight into something else. I know for us, say, we didn't jump right back into it, but part of that for us was we were taught that all churches were very bad. So it wasn't
Mhm.
we were right, everyone else was wrong. Well, there's not we know all the people that believe
Yeah.
like we did, or we thought we did. We thought we were it.
Yeah.
But, like, there is this whole world of different organizations and churches,
Mhm.
and not all are bad. I don't believe all are bad,
Mhm.
but I do think that people that have backgrounds like us just do fall right into multi-level marketing. My dad was a multi-level marketing genius. Like, it was just one after the other, after the other, after the other. And then when I got out actually, even before I got out, I started, Pampered Chef? Pampered Chef.
Yeah. I did
And
pamper chef.
then yes, and then I did Cincy I mean, I did a whole gamut of them.
Mhm.
And now when you start learning all this stuff, I'm like, "Oh my
Yep.
gosh, it
Oh my
makes sense. We
god.
were
That was a
ready to
cool
go."
too.
Yes. And that's I swear I mean, that's why they it started with the
Mhm.
women being able to work from home and all that. But I'm like, this is
Mhm.
why they target church people because
Yep.
they know that we value being at home with our kids, and they're like,
Mhm.
"Boom, here we go. We're gonna target these women,"
Mhm.
and how they've done real well with it.
And they did.
So,
They
they
did.
obviously
Yeah.
know what they're doing there. But yeah, but it's so
Absolutely.
easy.
Yeah, and I think when you grow up and there's a high percentage of folks who end up in the church who had abusive upbringings. And I think when you grow up with the chaos of domestic abuse in your home, you migrate towards cults, towards high control religion, towards these things that provide security because you've been so insecure and uncertain. And I did do that because I would say that even in my family of origin, even if it was so controlling, it was very chaotic and very confusing and double meanings in everything and, you know, constantly contradicting things, constantly contradicting whatever my father believed in the moment or wanted in the moment. And you just didn't know. It was so unpredictable. And so I went into a denomination that was very cerebral and very, um, systematic because I was looking for that soothingness to my nervous system of this control. I don't think that was a bad desire to want some system and want some, uh, just to, exist in my head, when everything was so chaotic. Um, I don't think that that was a bad leaning. I think it was very human and very survival focused. And I think that but they can also just make you susceptible to those high control groups because they know that we want that and they know that we're looking for that. And that is why we go from one place to another, because that nervous system never gets an opportunity to relax and to heal. So we're looking for the next thing that will keep us from having to be scared and will just help us, tell us what to do, tell us what to believe. And it just takes that embodiment uh time of just letting our nervous systems heal and recognizing that we can give that security to ourselves. Like constantly religion does this, uh, Christianity does this, it kinda teaches you to look for that security outside of yourself by teaching you that you are sinful and bad. And so to kind of reverse that and, like, actually I'm good and, like, I have all the resources that I need and I can reparent myself and I can give this assurance to myself and I can provide the security for myself and and getting to that place is not the day after you leave. Will not happen the day after you leave. It'll happen 20 years later, maybe. I'm still in that process. I'm still in that process.
I've seen the little, thing come up on Instagram, a little picture, it's super cute, of someone saying of a little cartoon thingy with bunch of flowers growing all over her, and then the other one's just kinda brown with, like, one little flower, and she's like or the flowery one says, "But we're supposed to grow." Like we're supposed to be
Yes.
growing and changing, or I think she even said change. We're supposed to be changing, and it's true. It's like,
Which
if we stayed the same like, I hope that every day I am trying to be a better mom, and
uh-huh,
because guess what? Every day I fail, every day I do
uh-huh,
something that I regret, and just learning how to, kinda manage that, and then like you were even saying, like, mindfulness and being mindful of, "Okay, I acknowledge that this happened, and then what can I do
uh-huh,
different next time said child does this?" Or,
uh-huh,
just kind of to process it where I've never it's still a challenge for me to do that, but I think it's the way to growth, I have to acknowledge all the mistakes and not just mistakes, but just things that could use a little improvement or change wherever it might be, but it's hard. It's hard to, I really struggle with the mindfulness part because I'm very like
mhm.
ADHD, so just to be present is super
Yeah.
hard for me.
How was I don't know if we talked about this when we did your interview. How were,
Mhm.
like, mistakes handled in your community? Like,
Oh,
how
very
were you
shameful.
allowed you weren't allowed to make them?
We weren't allowed to make them, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. But if you
Mhm.
did, like, depending on the severity and it really depended, I like to say, on what your last name was, because if you were valued, then your children might get to scrape things under the rug, but if you're not, like my family, then you're gonna stand up front and repent. So, it was basically like, you would just have to stand up, they would tell the whole congregation what you did, and you have to say, "I'm sorry." But it was always, like, a very public rebuke. Mhm.
Ah!
Super fun.
That's
And if it was a
terrifying.
and if you screwed up before, like so there was probably, I'm guessing, like 100 people in our congregation locally, we called them assemblies, but then during holidays, because we couldn't celebrate any holidays, we would meet at the fairgrounds, and so, like, all of the assemblies from California would meet in Central California at the fairgrounds, and we would have a camp during Christmas, like, coming up as a
Uh-huh.
camp if anyone's interested. And which one of these days I wanna go to one just to show up in, like, my little shorts. Like, that's all I wanna do. And just see
You're
if
like,
they kick me out or if they
"She's
let
a
me stay.
Jezebel.
Yeah,
She's
they hate me.
We're hoping that she converts soon. We're hoping the
Well, they're
Lord
really
brings her
hoping
back to the flock."
yes. So we would meet so anyway, we'd meet at these fairgrounds for camp time, but there would be, like, 1,000 people because it's all of our assemblies all around California or Texas, anyone could come.
Mhm.
So if you screwed up around, like, camp time within, a month, then it would get brought up at camp, and you would have to stand up in front of all the people and all your friends from other assemblies. So you really
Did
wanted
this
to
never
screw up
happen
when
to
you were
you?
home. No, not at a camp. I was a rule follower. I was terrified of getting caught. I mean,
Ah.
I did stuff, but I obviously was really good at hiding it because, yeah, I was a rule follower through and through. I mean, you would assume that. And so I was
Uh-huh.
terrified of being caught. I never had to get up on stand like, no, I never had to. My husband did, but yeah. So it was always real so, yeah, it was very scary. Doing wrong was very scary, so you just didn't do it.
Uh-huh.
You just didn't
Uh-huh.
do it. And so
Uh-huh.
and you asked me that, and I think where you're going with that is, like, now it's okay to be wrong. Like you were saying earlier, it's like to me, it's still very scary. I still get even, like, with my husband, it's actually a big deal because we have to,
Mhm.
communicate. I get super defensive still because I don't wanna be
Uh-huh.
wrong. Like, I don't wanna be wrong. And I know it, like, I know that I do that, and I know it's not okay, like, how I display it, but it is just, like, so built in. So that's why when I do, like, screw up, like, whether it's I yell at the kids or I try always apologize because that is
Mhm.
so important for me for them to see that I am not perfect because I am not even
Uh-huh.
close. We didn't have that, and so it was so scary to mess up. So, my kids mess up all the time, so I'm assuming they're getting the message.
They're
and
like,
that
"I figured that."
they're like cool with it.
They
So
are
I don't
not
know,
on
maybe
the rule follower track.
no, they are not. No,
They
they are
picked a
not.
different degree.
They
Yes.
skipped that one, which I'm very thankful for. But sometimes I'm like, oh, but can we please brush your hair out?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think also just in these communities, it's not just like everything was like on a right and wrong scale. And I think that that's something that I have had to learn is like there are a very, very few number of things that go on the right and wrong scale. Most things are on the personal preference scale. And I'm allowed to have a personal preference, and other people are allowed to have a personal preference. And we can decide so many things. There's so many things that are just whatever we want to do. And yeah, and so few things like murder, we probably collectively as a society think murder's bad. Um, most people think rape is bad, but questionable. Questionable on that one, depending on what community you're in. Embezzling money, stealing, like, there's just some things it's like, most people think this is wrong and this is gonna be on the right or wrong scale. But most stuff isn't on that scale, like, most of the stuff just doesn't, and it's so freeing to me to not filter everything through, "Is this right or wrong?" And, like, I need to pray over the dress that I wear to ask the Lord if it's okay to wear, or pray over the book that I just choose to read, or just pretend like God's not watching
Mhm.
because I think if I did ask God, God would probably say no. So
Right.
we're
Are you
just
sure he
gonna
said yes?
we're just gonna say like God's not here right now. Um,
Right.
yeah, but I feel
Yeah.
like that's very freeing. I have found that very
Yes.
freeing of just like,
Yes.
especially with other people. Like I don't have to have an opinion about your life. Like I don't need to care. Like I can care as much as you want me to care, but it's not my job to assess if you're living your life right. Like I'm gonna let you do what you wanna
You can
do
just
and
move on. Right.
Mhm.
Yeah, and it is so freeing because it's so exhausting
Mhm.
always because we were all up in everyone's business. We knew everything about everyone in our group.
Mhm.
And it is exhausting. Like, who should I
Mhm.
be judging right now? Who needs
Mhm.
extra prayer? Who needs it's like you're taking care of the whole world
Who
and
needs
it's
accountability?
a lot of pressure. Yes, who needs accountability? Like, a lot, and so it
Mhm.
is quite a relief, and I actually feel very much the same way. I am, like, midline whenever people talk politics or anything, I'm just like, "Just remember, I'm right
Mhm.
in the middle of that
Mhm.
road with pretty much everything in life, everything."
Yes.
And it is
Yes.
because I truly think, like, people need to have their own opinions. One thing that I'm big on
Mhm.
is my kids. I want my kids to feel accepted no matter what they choose in life besides murder or other bad
Yeah.
things you mentioned. I want them to know that they're accepted no matter what from me, and it's very important to me because we didn't feel that way growing up. It was like, well, I mean, you're good at this moment sitting on your metal chair looking forward and
Mm,
listening to leadership, but no, other
mm.
than that.
Well, I mean, sure, that's very hard for you to manage, like, knowing, like, as you said, that you don't have control over that.
Mhm.
And, like,
Yeah.
it's either you get super, super controlled to manage that, or you, like, address your own nervous system, as you were saying, and just
Mhm.
address what's coming up for you and be a healthy person for you so that you can interact in that
Mhm.
healthy way that then will help them regulate. And
Right.
it's a longer road, it's a much harder road, but I think long term, that's gonna
Yeah.
be so much more fruitful and productive for your relationship with your kids
Yeah.
than if you were getting them to behave all the time and were being praised for being such a wonderful parent, but then your
Mhm.
kids grow up and they hate
Mhm.
you or they're
Yes.
robots. Yeah.
Right. Right. And
Mm.
mine aren't. So I keep telling myself, "Hey, I'm doing something right. They've got lots of free will. I'm doing something right." But yeah, it's oh my gosh. That's a
It's a
whole
long
yeah,
road, but
parenting.
it'll pay off.
Yeah.
It'll pay off.
So we laugh all
Yeah.
the time about I'm like I talk with my sister, I'm like, There is no possible way any child in our family would have survived growing up the way we grew up. Like, I can't even
Mhm.
or the parents. I can't even imagine having my kids, and
Mhm.
they're all older now too, even at the ages they are now, there is no way they could sit for 2 hours plus and some, um, on a metal chair listening to a sermon.
Yep.
There's no way. And that's
Yeah.
what all kids everyone, we all met together and there was no Sunday school or anything, so it was like, you had
Yeah.
to. You sat there for
You won't
hours,
be
and I'm
joining
like,
no cults right now.
"No, no, no, no." I'm like, "You guys do not have what it takes to be in a cult." So, so
You
far,
failed
that's good news.
cult school.
I
No
yes,
cults for
yes.
you.
Yeah, I was an A plus student in cult school for
Yeah.
sure. Just follow the
Yeah.
leader.
I know. I
Oh
know, and
my
I just
god.
think of, like, how many ways that the community that I was in, like, forced me to be dishonest and lie,
Yes.
and
Yep.
how I used to, like, feel a lot of, like, shame for that because lying is bad and you shouldn't lie, and yet to look at those situations and being like, actually, like, it was comply or lie, and most of the time I lied, and I think that was appropriate for the community that I was in. I don't think hiding that I was doing college or, removing my parents from my bank account, secret spy shit,
Right, right.
but
No.
for a purpose. It was for
Yeah,
survival.
yeah.
Telling selective truths to certain people and to my parents
Mhm.
and you're raised to be like so honest and like lying is like the worst possible sin and to like
Yeah,
have to like quote unquote sin in order to survive and like realize like now just like having a lot of compassion for myself and also cheering myself on that I would risk my soul to survive this community and now I'm like, "You're a little badass." Like,
yeah.
that
Super
was a
proud of
cool
yourself
little
now.
hoodwink
Yes.
that you pulled pulled the wool over their
Yes.
eyes, used some of their tactics against you, and, yeah, and, like, you did what you had to do. You were scrappy and you figured it out and you got out and those you have to do those things for survival and then finding spaces where you're no longer in survival so this isn't necessary anymore, this doesn't serve anymore, I don't need to do this because I am actually safe now and this isn't I don't need this survival mechanism anymore and let those things go. um yeah, so it's not right or wrong, it's survival or not survival.
Yeah. Well, and I think so much of that, the lying part of it, because we were always, told that the world and everyone was hypocrites. And it's so funny now because it's like, that's what we were. Like,
Yeah.
but because they taught us to be, they taught us to like, you better
Yeah.
lie and be a really good hypocrite.
Mhm.
Because if it's
Put
found
on a
out,
happy face.
yes, yes, fake
Yes.
it till you make it.
Mhm.
Yeah, but it created really good, dishonest people.
Mhm.
Really good. Lying is so natural and it's just your first reaction, even for
Mhm.
stupid stuff. Like, did you eat both pieces of bread? No. Like, it could be so stupid, but
Mhm.
and that's something I feel like I've not mastered. Never have I mastered
Mhm.
anything, but like I've done really well with it. I feel like that was one of the things earlier on I got a hand on because I noticed it. Like, why does it matter if I had two pieces of
Mhm.
bread? Like, why am I
Yeah.
feeling I need to lie about that? Even the
Right.
question wasn't even like a like, you're in trouble. And so
Right.
I think it's that instinct of, like you said, like, "Oh, I'm in trouble. I need to lie. Oh, I'm in trouble. I need
Mhm.
to lie." Where it's like, "No,
Mhm.
you're not anymore. You've got, it's that
Uh-huh.
survival mechanism and you
Mhm.
wanna just, But
Uh-huh.
and like you said, it served its purpose, like when I needed
Mhm.
my lying mechanism, it worked and it helped me survive. But now I don't need it, and it's hard. And I think that's
Mhm.
probably a lot of what you do, but it's that deconstruction part of this all,
Mhm.
Awesome.
And we're allowed
Awesome.
to take a break from it all.
Yes, we are.
We can
Yes,
spend
we
a
are.
lot of time healing, 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 healing. Sometimes you just need to watch a
No.
funny movie. And eat some
Yes, I did
chocolate.
that this week. Yes. Oh my gosh, yes, and take a
What funny
nap.
movie did you watch?
6 nights, 7 days.
Okay, is it
It's
like a
like this
rom-com?
old
Okay.
yeah. But this is again, this is trauma, but I like to watch things that I've already seen a lot of times, so
Okay.
I know what to
You know
expect.
what happened.
Yes. So
Oh, I
I
had never thought of that as, like, a trauma thing, because I know
uh-huh.
some people who just, like, rewatch, and I'm like, I would be so bored if I, like, knew what was
Yeah,
gonna happen,
I
but, like, oh,
rewatch.
like, as that being, like, a trauma thing of, like, I know what to expect, I know how this is gonna
I mean,
end.
I'm a
Oh, I
I
totally get
think
that.
that's what it is. Yeah.
I totally get that,
So
yeah.
I have a and then I'm very ADHD too, so I'll have a movie going, but I can't just sit and watch a movie. So I'm usually working on
Mhm.
my computer or reading or
Mm,
I'm really special.
mhm.
Um, but but yeah, but I
You are,
did do that and I
you
was very proud of myself. I took a break from cult, docs
are.
and
Whole
um
documentaries. I'm really
they're the
into
best.
murder documentaries right now.
Yes.
Murder and crime
Oh,
documentaries.
oh, yay. Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, thank you, Catherine, so much for
This
being
is so
here.
fun.
So fun, and I feel like I'm gonna need to just, like, book a session with you so
Oh,
we can just
yeah.
dig into
Anytime.
all of the
Anytime.
things.
Anytime,
Oh, that was
anytime, anytime. We'll
amazing.
just hang out.
I love it.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much.
Yay! It's really fun.
Thank you all for joining me for another episode of the Shanny Pants Show. I really appreciate you guys hanging out with me every week. You can find all of my links to all my social medias, anything your heart desires at shannypantsshow.com. You can even find my amazing merch is back up and running there. And you can email me from there, all the things, all the things. Also, you always ask, how can you help me out with this whole podcast situation? You can subscribe to my podcast. You can leave reviews. You can share it with friends. I appreciate it all. So I am super excited to bring you guys the rest of the season. It's going to be amazing. And I'll see you next week.